I am Ron Martinez. I'm a professor here at the university. I'm actually attached to a department called DELEM, which is the Departamento de Letras Estrangeiras Modernas. My first language is English, and last year we gave the same course in Portuguese. I'm really happy that I can do this in English this year. If I go too fast, that's your problem. No, if you go too fast, I'm very sorry. Also, hello to everybody who is watching this live. Thank you for being here, and thank you for watching. I feel a little bit like a game show host when I say that. You know, this class is being brought to you by PRPPG. Thank you very much for everybody for being here. And I'm really, really excited about giving this course again. Last year we gave this course and everything was brand new. The kind of class that was given, all the technology involved, everything. So I feel like I have a little bit more experience with it now. I feel a little bit more comfortable giving this class than I did last year. And I'm really excited because this here, all of you guys here, you represent so many diverse areas. All you guys watching right now live, you represent so many diverse areas. You represent a community of researchers here at the university. For example, let me just ask, raise your hand if you are on a master's course here. Okay, raise your hand if you're a doctoral course. All right, raise your hand if you are from the setor de ciências humanas. A few of you. Setor de tecnologia, more of you. Biológicas, many more. Well, it's a good mix. And you know what? There aren't very many opportunities here, or anywhere really, that all of you from all these different areas will be sitting down together. It's a kind of a rare opportunity that we have here, that you have this time to sit down and with people who are from a completely different area. And by the end of this course, you will actually have a chance to not only sit next to somebody, but talk to somebody from a different area and even receive feedback on your work from somebody from a different area. I know that might seem strange to you right now, but actually I hope that it's a valuable experience. You'll notice that the name of this class is, in SIGA, is Escrita, Acadêmica, Inglês. But I kind of on purpose left it Introduction to Academic Writing, without the English part here. And the reason is that I believe that my job here is not only to get you to learn to write research articles in English only, but I'm hoping that whatever I give you here also has a positive repercussion on your Portuguese writing, whatever your first language may be. And that was a common comment from the last version of this course, is that many people said, you know what, a lot of the things that I learned here in this class, I'm applying in my articles in Portuguese too. So we're talking about not only academic writing in English, but academic writing in general as well. It doesn't stay only in English. However, as you all know, the research world today, a lot of it is in English. Where I'm originally from San Francisco, California, and I used to be a professor at a university there called San Francisco State University. And I used to help people with graduate writing, graduate level, postgraduate level writing there. And you know what? The problems that undergraduate students face over there in the United States and also in the United Kingdom, where I've also taught, are not that much different from the challenges that those students face here in Brazil. Because if you think about it, you know, when you all did your undergraduate degrees, wherever they were, you may have had to do some writing, but the writing wasn't really the main part of your undergraduate course. And suddenly, from an undergraduate student, you go to master's level, or your graduate level course, your postgraduate course, and suddenly, writing becomes the main thing. You have to write a dissertation. You have to write a thesis. As if by magic, somebody teaches you from the undergraduate level to the graduate level to write that, but nobody really does. Nobody really takes time to focus on writing at the postgraduate level. Not too much, not too often. At the undergraduate level, you may have to do some writing, but at the postgraduate level, the thesis writing and dissertation writing, it almost like it identifies you as a student and suddenly becomes a much greater burden. And so this class, I hope, will help alleviate a little bit of that burden so that when you, by the end of this course, you feel a little bit more confident about your writing. Again, not only in English, but in Portuguese as well. So today's class is not only about writing papers, right? Okay, yeah, so before I continue, I should tell you that we have a team of people here that are also important to this class. And they are part of CAPA and part of this class. And they're here to remind me that the people who are watching live right now, the password, the keyword is paper. That's for them to make sure that they're attending the class. Is that right? Okay. I'm going to show you a number now. Let's see if you can guess what this number is. Perhaps the interest rate on my credit card? No. How many people will be absent in this class by the end of the course? No. This number here, 95%, represents the total percentage of research in the research world that's published in English. 95% of science in the Science Citation Index, SCI, 95% of all papers are published in the English language. However, the authors of those papers are not 100% or 95% native speakers of English. Now, in fact, as you'll see a little bit later, a very large proportion of people who are authoring or authors on international research papers, their first language isn't English. So this represents a large challenge, as you all know. You will all, many of you, the vast majority of you, will have to write a paper very soon. Some of you will need to do it in order to defend your thesis. If you don't publish an article in a journal, then you can't receive your diploma. Some of you will need to show that an article has been accepted just to qualify. Anybody here in that position? Yep. Which program are you from? Ecologia e Conservação. Yeah, so in the postgraduate program in ecology and conservation, it's one example, but there are many others, where the person has to show that they have an article accepted in order to qualificar. So obviously there's a lot of pressure that many of you feel. That's why so many of you are here today. This number obviously is concerned. Whoops. Uh-oh. Is everything okay? Continue recent. Uh-huh. Huh? Só segundinho.
Hello, guys. Seguinte, para todo mundo que está aqui e para todo mundo que está no stream, vocês têm que responder uma chamada agora, no Moodle. Primeiramente, vocês têm que entrar no SIGA, com o e-mail de vocês e a senha da UFPR. Depois de lá do SIGA, vocês vão ver um botãozinho lá para entrar no Moodle. Com o login e a senha do Moodle, quem tiver aqui, claro, vai conseguir ver a disciplina e lá vai ter chamada número 1. Agora, me faltou, qual é o... Lá tem um quiz que vocês devem responder e a palavra certa é paper. Então, vocês entram no SIGA, depois no Moodle. Lá no Moodle, vocês vão procurar a chamada na disciplina, né, de texto científico. E vocês vão responder essa chamada lá com a palavra paper, tá? Quem não conseguir entrar no SIGA, deve, obviamente, entrar em contato com a secretaria de vocês. Quem não conseguir entrar em contato com... Quem não conseguir entrar no Moodle ou alguma coisa assim, pode mandar um e-mail para a gente, para transversal@ufpr.br, tá bom?
Não está acessando. Posso continuar? We'll be back after these messages. Tá. Okay. Okay? All right. This is not your typical class. All kinds of moving parts happening at the same time. And I forgot to tell you at the beginning, at any time, if you have a question, a comment, or anything, this is the same thing for people who are watching online, people here in the auditorium. You have a direct line of communication with me through the team that's monitoring questions through this website here. This link, which appears at the top of the slides. So at any time, you can send a question or comment. And the nice thing about this particular way of sending a question or comment is that somebody might have a question, and you can actually like the question to kind of reinforce the want that question answered. Oops. All right, so moving on. I started becoming interested in the internationalization of science. Well, one of the things was when I saw this article that you see here. This is from the Estadão. The author is a guy named Ayrton Escobar, written in 2013. Universidades Brasileiras em Busca da Excelência. And I read this with a lot of curiosity because I was coming here to Brazil to be a professor, and I was very interested in this idea of internationalization and what was happening in Brazil. And what the author basically says is that Brazil does not do as well as it should do because of English. They also say that there are not enough partnerships between Brazilian universities and foreign partners, but they really focus on the English. And this is a theme that I want to kind of focus on a lot today, which is, what is the role of English in the publication world for academic writing? As you can see here, this is what the author writes. So, no big surprise there. English seems to be something really important for, according to these authors, and Robert Eni, who actually is from California as well. They say that, you know, if you have English, then you can internationalize more easily. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but I'd like to look at that more carefully today. Did you know that the Brazilian academic journals are more English today than they are in Portuguese? Since 2014, yeah. Since 2014, the journals published here in Brazil, more of them are actually accepting articles only in English than in Portuguese. That's how much the journals have internationalized. Again, looking towards English as a way to internationalize, increase impact. But I worry a little bit about this focus on English, and I worry a little bit on this focus on production. Because many of you're in graduate school now, you're in your graduate programs, and in many cases, instead of focusing on what you're doing, your research, a lot of people here will be thinking about, oh no, is the journal I'm going to publish in Qualis A1, A2? And I think that focusing too much on the language you're publishing in and focusing on too much how many articles that you can produce from your thesis can distract a little bit from the quality of the research itself. And I'll talk more about that now. There is even research by Daniel Sarowitz showing that the pressure to publish has actually reduced the quality of publication. And what does he mean by that? He means that more and more, because of this pressure to produce, fewer and fewer people are interested in producing longitudinal studies because they take too long, or on smaller cohorts. Quality of research has gone down to much to the extent that Peter Higgs, who's the guy responsible for the God particle discovery, right? According to him, that he says that he would not even be productive enough for today's academia, because he has basically one big study that he's famous for. Peter Higgs would not get a CNPq Bolsa de Produtividade. And that says a lot. And in your programs, well, you can see this example. A lot of you have to deal with this. I won't say which program this is from because many programs are in the same condition. But for many people, this is, as you near the date of your defense or even your qualification, this is a kind of a sword of Damocles hanging above you, knowing that at any moment, very soon, you will have to show that you have produced something. I'm not saying this is a good or bad thing. I do think it's worth thinking about carefully. And we'll be talking about that a lot today. Last year, I asked this question about in postgraduate programs of people in this class last year. 77%, whoops, I should stop doing that. 77% said that they have to show proof of production. Excuse me. And so in 2016, I founded a writing center called Kappa. Have you heard of it? Ah, man, I'm not doing my job. All right, one person. A few, okay. Kappa is the Centro de Assessoria de Publicação Acadêmica. I'm the director of this program. And it's a program that exists in order to support students like yourselves in this process of publication. But our focus is not only on getting you to produce your article. That's important. We love that you get published. But we want to be there during the process of writing as well. We want to be a kind of escape valve for these pressures that you have. We're there for you to talk about your writing, to help you, give you feedback on your writing throughout the writing process. And we also hold events, for example, next Saturday, we're holding an event which we hold once a month called Dia de Produção. I don't know if you've heard of that before, where people can come, sit down. I think you've been there before. No, yeah, you've been. One of the participants is here, where you can sit down and work on your thesis or your dissertation and have people from Kappa like myself there to help you. I felt the need for this center because I wanted people to have a place where they could actually deal with writing as a social practice, not just sitting alone working on a thesis, working on an article, worried that they somehow have to magically know how to produce an article when in fact none of us are born with that ability. None of us is a native speaker of academic writing in Portuguese or in English. And when this center was launched, it was announced by the UFPR Facebook, and on the first 24 hours, I keep doing that, 2,200 people liked. I know, I have to like put a piece of tape or something over there so I stop doing this. Whoops. $2,200 people with 667 shares in the first 24 hours, with a lot of people very happy about it, as you can see. This is one of the comments. Not everybody was as enthusiastic as her, but there was a lot of enthusiasm. And I think that just goes to show how people just felt, okay, finally, you know, someone there to help, someone there to give us a hand with this stuff, because it's not easy. You don't magically acquire the powers of academic writing when you graduate from college to go to graduate school. It's not something you're just born with. And so this is a center to aid in that. However, I want to pose this question: is English the key? Is English the key to publication? Authors, Mann and colleagues, they point to two things. One is that there is a correlation. There does seem to be a correlation between the home of the main authors of an article. So if they come from the United States and Canada and Britain, for example, there is some kind of correlation between English-speaking countries or countries that have a strong demonstrable proficiency of English, so like the Scandinavian, Nordic countries. And but there is something else which probably is talked about less, and it's related, which is the other correlation is with the research investment of the country. So the more a country invests in their technology and science and innovation, the higher the correlation of success with publishing research in high-impact journals. So this is a normal world map, right? Pay attention to the United States, what color it is. Pay attention to Africa, sort of red and yellow in the middle. Pay attention to Australia, on the yellow on the right, and pay attention to Japan, there up on the upper right-hand corner, and also Europe up there, and Brazil. Because now I'm going to show you a map which reflects proportionately how successful those geographic regions are in the publication process. So look how the map changes. Suddenly America got fat, United States, North America, and Australia stayed about the same time, the same size. Africa, can you even see Africa in that map? It's this little tiny sliver of a region there in the middle. Japan is that big thing at the upper right-hand corner, the purple thing. Japan got really big. And look at Europe. Europe is that inflated thing in the middle, kind of pinkish, violet color. And Brazil kind of shrunk there. So there you can see some evidence of what they were talking about there. The English is part of it. You see that there is some kind of correlation between English, because you have United States and Canada pretty big, you have Australia pretty big, India, arguably. But Japan's first language is not English. And there are some English-speaking countries in Africa. And there are many countries there that are really big there in the middle in Europe that also are not English-speaking. So what they have, what that map reflects, is the other side of the coin. That in fact, a better reflection is the investment the government has made in those countries, in their university, in giving them really good labs, in attracting the best minds in the world, et cetera, et cetera. And so here you can see numbers that reflect that. The numbers are really small. I don't know if you probably can't read those, but basically you can see that the greatest proportion, United States with nearly 30% of the research investment, Europe, Western Europe with over 22%, and East and Southeast Asia with almost 35%. And there you see that reflected in that map. It's not the English so much, but there's something else going on as well. Yeah, of course, those people, they publish in English. They do. They write most of their papers in international journals in English. But it's not the English that's causing that publication success. There's something else behind that. The winner of the 8th prize, Octavio Frias de Oliveira, in oncology research, she says this: não há como ter pesquisa de qualidade sem financiamento, mesmo que haja formação, mesmo que haja interesse, and I would add, mesmo que haja inglês. You could have perfect English. If you don't have a good research, if your research isn't worthwhile, there's no point. You got to have good research to be published in high-impact journals. Then that research is communicated in English internationally. I say this because at CAPA, we receive a lot of manuscripts that have already been submitted to journals. Most of the manuscripts we receive are manuscripts that are still going to be sent to journals. But we receive a lot of manuscripts that have already been sent to journals as well. And one thing that's interesting is that those articles sometimes, in most cases, they come back with comments about the English. And so they come to CAPA to say, please help us with the English. But what I find particularly interesting is the extent to which the researchers say that the problems of the article are to do with English. So here's a typical comment from a typical email that we receive. Just read that.
No, you can publish translations in English of papers that I have already published.
You? Not yet. I will have a moment, yeah. So I find this interesting because they say the article came back with problems na gramática do inglês. Okay, so keep that in mind. That's what many researchers come to CAPA with. Our article was returned from the journal because there was problems with gramática do inglês. And many people believe that English is the problem with their article. Highland says, attitude surveys reveal that English as an additional language authors often believe editors and referees are prejudiced against them for any standard language uses. So many people believe that there's prejudice, there's a bias, there's a prejudice against non-native speakers of English. Do you believe that? Many people do. You don't have to say yes or no now, because I know that many people in their heads are thinking, yeah, you know, there is some bias. I think the journals really, you know, don't like non-native speaking English. So let's look at that a little bit, this thing about native speaking English, and if there's a bias against or prejudice against non-native speakers of English. Let's look for evidence. You can sing this if you want. Let's look for evidence of bias. I like evidence-based stuff. Let's see if there's evidence of this bias against native speakers. John Flowerdew talks about that he believes, or he believed, that non-native speakers maybe suffer a stigma. That maybe they suffer a stigma, that they're stigmatized. That as soon as a reviewer, a native speaker reviewer, sees something that is not native-like, says, this person's a non-native speaker, probably the research is not as good as research that was done in the United States or Britain or so on. Except that he himself, John Flowerdew, admits this. So it's difficult to find concrete evidence of this. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence, a lot of attitudinal surveys about this, people who believe that they have been discriminated against, but it's hard to show proof of this. So let's look at this. Let's look for any evidence that there might be. Indeed, there is some evidence that native speakers are on the minds of journal editors when they give feedback, because the word native speaker appears in the feedback of many journals. Maybe you have been the victims of this yourselves. Those of you watching live, maybe some of you have received this. When you get feedback from the editor of the journal and saying, please revise this manuscript, please ask a native speaker to revise it for issues of English. This happens. I have lots of evidence for that. Here, let's see if I can use the marker. Oops, oh, that didn't work. I'll use it another day. Here, and I don't know if you noticed this, but the person who wrote this also made mistakes in English. Here, it is recommended to consult made mistakes in their feedback. Recommended to consult a native speaker for language support. So the word native appears ubiquitously in these comments. Lots of native stuff. But another question is, does non-native English cause rejection? This is important for this class to think about, because if you think that you have to write perfect English, whatever that is, if you think that, then you will never, ever, ever be satisfied with your English. Do you have perfect Portuguese? She says yes. No, but most people say, no, I mean, I make mistakes. So we all make mistakes. I make mistakes in English all the time. So no such thing as perfect, but this is important to think about, because if you believe that already when you submit an article, the English is going to be imperfect, therefore it stands a higher chance of rejection, that's bad news. So let's look at that. Martin Hewings, he wanted to see, is there evidence that reviewers reject articles because they identify them as being non-native speakers? And so he collected 228 evaluations of manuscripts submitted to this journal, the English for Specific Purposes journal. These were evaluated by 56 different reviewers. And then these were further organized by type of author, native and non-native. And then he separated these into manuscripts that had been accepted, those that the editor said, please revise or resubmit, and those that had been rejected. All right? And here's what he found. So on the left is native, on the right, non-native. And look at category C. The non-natives were rejected 22% of the time, or natives 13%. Is that evidence of bias, do you think? Is that evidence of prejudice against non-native speakers? On the surface, it would appear, right? So, well, look, non-native speakers were rejected more than native speakers. However, if you look at it more closely, what he says is actually there is no evidence in the comments of the reviewers that English was responsible for the rejection. So he says it was not always possible to decide whether a comment was referring to language or content. And this is key right here. In my experience, looking at many manuscripts and decision letters from editors, is that when someone comes to CAPA and says, please help me with my manuscript, the English, many times I look and say, you know what, it's not just the English. Here, there's also issues of content, so I have to call a specialist to look at it with me from the area. So this is consistent with my experience as well. But Martin Hewings also says, while number of comments or language on non-native English speakers' papers is higher, native English speaker authors appear to attract more criticism. Again, there is no clear evidence that non-native English-speaking authors are disadvantaged relative to native English-speaking authors because they do not have English as a first language. So, in fact, what he finds is the opposite. That what it would seem to be, at least in the case of this journal, is that when a reviewer sees a manuscript that may have been, or looks like it's been written by a non-native speaker, and there were some mistakes, they weren't really critical of those mistakes. But if it appeared that it was a native speaker who made careless mistakes, then they were more critical of the English. That's interesting, but maybe even more interesting is this. Look at that. This, to me, is huge. This, to me, is a big point. And it's a point that we're going to talk about again and again in this class, about how important it is to make one's contribution clear. What is it that you're bringing new? In so many cases, you are bringing something new, but you're not making it clear when you write it. This is super duper huge. Be able to show clearly to the reviewer that you're making a new and interesting contribution to the field, very clearly. That's really big. I think another possible explanation for this, or something that's interesting, is that in many countries, there are people who don't have access to literature, to the latest research, like more developed countries may have. And so they may not know what's new. That's possible too. But for me, it's really important that this point here about nothing new or of interest is something that is a point that I see come up again and again and again in the feedback from journal editors. And the last point here about that 12% was outside of ESP, that's something else called wrong journal choice, which is, again, probably one of the biggest reasons manuscripts are rejected, is that you simply submitted it to the wrong journal. Why does that happen? Either you don't know the journal, or another common reason is you're saying, okay, my manuscript, it's actually better for this journal, but since this other journal is or A2, I'm going to submit it to that one because, you know, it'll look better on my lachis. But then you're just wasting everybody's time because this goes back. Here's another interesting point from the same study. In the corresponding 15 reviews of native English-speaking authored papers, 13% they offered nothing new or of interest, and none claimed that they were not ESP related. So non-native speakers were rejected mostly because of not stating what was new, or not doing, or not writing something that was ESP related, the journals. Whatever the reasons, they appeared to lie outside any difficulties author may have had in producing written English. And this you find in the research related to academic publishing over and over again. In reality, here in Brazil, or in France or in Hong Kong, wherever you go, and if you talk to a group of native speakers and you talk to a group of non-native speakers, the same problems that the native speakers have, the non-native speakers have in terms of getting published, things like not being able to structure the text correctly or not making it clear what the contribution is, not having a good discussion, et cetera, et cetera. Those are difficulties that lie outside the English itself. Those are problems to do with the academic genre, and that seems to exist independent from language. So let's look if there's evidence of the causes of rejection for articles. Come back to evidence again. Indeed, there are some papers that have analyzed this in different areas. I'm going to focus on 3 today. The first one by Diane Belcher in the area of applied linguistics, Bordage in the medical area, and also Pearson in the medical discipline. And when you look at what comes up, they analyze manuscripts to see why do manuscripts get rejected. They looked at the rejection letters of various manuscripts, and what they find is this. These are the things that come up as problematic on the left-hand side. Now, if you see an X, that means that that study did not point to this issue as a problem. So for example, wrong journal, the first one, was shown by Bordage as being a problem, a common problem, whereas by Belcher and Pearson it was not. You can see, though, there are some that actually come up quite often. So faulty method. There's something problem with the methodology of the research. That was a common issue pointed out by reviewers. Poor discussion or overstating the importance of findings. That was also very common. Writing difficult to follow. Where is the argument going? Where is this discussion going? That was a common problem. Inadequate review of the literature, that was common. Nothing new, that was common. Contribution not clear, also common. But look at English. None of these authors point to problems with English language itself as being a common issue pointed out in the comments of reviewers. They don't say, this article is being rejected because of English. That does happen, but it happens in what's called a desk rejection. So a desk rejection is when you send an article to a journal and the English is so incomprehensible and so bad that the journal editor looks at it and says, I'm not even sending this to review. That's a desk rejection. But when it goes out to review, according to these authors, it's not a common issue for reviewers to say, you know what, the English is bad here, this article has been rejected. Instead, you have all these other things. Conversely, Bordage actually shows why articles get accepted, and it's the other side of the coin. Reviewers saying that the article is timely, that the timing is good, we need this article now. Relevant, critical, clear, important, 20%. Well-written, straightforward, easy to follow, logical, and we'll talk about logic in a second, 18%. Well-designed study, the methodology, 10%. So you can see, those are the reasons articles get accepted. Success, in other words, success is more related to the research itself, a good, timely, a well-explained and timely study, than to do with English. English is important, but just so that you're clear, everything starts from itself. This is another example from reviewer criteria from a journal that I review for. Same thing. The first question, does the manuscript contain new and significant information to justify publication? The last thing is the language acceptable? But all those other things, and it's usually not just one thing that makes an article rejected. It's usually a few things. So I want to get back to this person who wrote this email and saying, that the article was rejected or returned because of problems with gramática do inglês. And how in the letters there were comments about native speakers, but look at all this other stuff above it. And in the middle of that second bullet point there, the first thing you see there is concern about the novelty of the work. Look at that. Look at the size of that paragraph. Concerns about the novelty. It's a big section and it comes first. They want the authors to deal with that first, even before the English part. And even the English part, they're talking about grammatical issues, but they're talking about other things too, things that are not clearly defined. But what I find interesting is that the authors of this paper, they completely ignored this thing about the concerns about the novelty of the work, what was new, that was not clear. Here's a little case study, a good example. And this is one thing that you may see one day when you try to publish an article. Reviewer 1, there's always at least 2 reviewers, or usually that's the case. And the reviewer writes back and says, this paper needs to have significant improvement as follows. 1, the major contribution and novelty are not clear enough. Again. 2, this is a different author. 2, coding layer characterization, this is something to do with mechanical engineering that I don't quite understand. And 3, more critical discussion is expected. All right. Now, what do you think, which points do you think the author paid attention to most? Just keep that in mind. What do you think the author really paid attention to there? He didn't pay attention to that, the major contribution and novelty. And he didn't pay attention to that. He's worried about number 2. He didn't know what to do with number 3. What do you mean more critical discussion? What does that mean? And then there was reviewer 2. And reviewer 2 had several comments. But the one that he noticed the most was, this paper needs to be thoroughly revised by a native English writer. There are a number of grammar errors. You have to keep in mind that reviewers of journals, especially journals of sciences not to do with language, so mechanical engineering, for example, they're not language experts. If they don't understand something, they don't think about things like cohesion and coherence and things like that to do with writing. They're thinking, I don't understand, it must be because there are grammar errors. That's the extent of their language knowledge. But anyway, the writer of this paper said, okay, I need to fix the grammar. And so he tried. Between these comments here, which one do you pay attention to most? Well, the author paid a special attention to that one. Didn't think about what critical discussion or major contribution was. And then the paper was ultimately rejected. Ken Hyland says that, and this has been a very controversial paper, but I think it was important. He says that this idea of linguistic injustice is actually a myth. It's a provocation, this title. But he's a provocation, I think it's an important one. Because I agree with Ken Hyland, who I hope to invite to talk to you guys at the end of this course. I agree with Ken Hyland that if you constantly focus on, my paper won't get published because of English, then you won't focus on the things that can affect publication. As we saw in the Bordage list of things, what are the elements that can lead to publication success? Things like writing a timely paper with good methodology whose contribution is clear. That can lead to success much more than if you have an irregular verb written in the wrong tense or wrong form. He says in this article, he says, I am not, of course, claiming peer review to be perfect. There is, however, little evidence to support the idea that there is a widespread and systematic bias against writers whose first language is not English. And some of the evidence he points to is this. The year 2000 compared to the year 2011. The left-hand column is native English speakers, and the right-hand column is non-native speakers. If you look, in just 10 years before 2011, year 2000, over 61% of authors in top journals were native speakers. Look how it changed in 2011. You have more non-native authors, 56% versus compared to 43% non-native authors. There's been a significant growth. This is a good thing. Again, there are no native academic writers. You're not born with that ability. It's something that you have to learn, be you native or non-native speaker, to learn academically, whether it be in Portuguese or English. You're not born with this ability. It's something that you have to learn, and it takes time, which is why, like it happens in some cases where you do research and then your advisor, orientador, writes the paper for you. That's a bad thing. That can happen sometimes because you're not going through the process of learning to write. And that's why one of the reasons we're here, so that you go through that process, you try to go through that process of becoming academic authors. Blaming English is maybe focusing on the wrong problem. It's not only English. English is part of it, but there's a much bigger gap. There's a much bigger issue there. So what are we going to do in this class? Yeah, our class is going to be in English. We're going to learn to write in English. We're going to look at texts in English. But I hope that by the end of this class, I have achieved something much bigger than that, just English. I hope that you, on the left-hand side, the top picture there, that you learn to tell your research story, that you learn how a research story is constructed, that you have some tools so that when you leave this auditorium and then you leave this class, this course, that you'll have some things that you can take home that you can always use. Electronic tools, all kinds of resources, so that many years from now you can do things on your own as well. I want you to think about, see those question marks in that photograph at the bottom. You're going to learn to think about, before you write, who is your audience? Who's reading? You're thinking about the reader. I want you to start thinking about the reader a lot in this course, because good writers, this comes up in research again and again, good writers, when they're writing, they're thinking about how that writing is going to be read. They're thinking about how that writing will be interpreted when someone reads it. And that little boy there that's going like this, that is an image I hope that reflects your feeling at the end of this course, that you feel more confident when you write. You feel that you can do it. I really hope that happens. So beyond produção, thinking beyond English, thinking of your development, your own construction as academic authors, this thing you're building right now. Probably nobody here, very few people, have a long list of publications in their laches. You're still trying to build that. I hope that happens here, that you see this as one of the steps along the way. That you learn to tell a research story, because that's what you're doing when you write an article. You're telling the story of your research, and you have to tell it well in a way that makes sense. You know, I have a son who's 4 years old. He's 4.5. He always reminds me, 4.5. He's 4.5. And when he tries to tell a story, it's a big mess. Because he hasn't quite, acquired enough knowledge of the world to know how, a story should start. So if I ask him, oh, what happened if let's say he scratches his, hello? Yeah. So if he has a scratch on, or maybe a sting on his cheek, I can say, Benjamin, what happened? And if I ask that question to you, or you would say, oh, I was I was playing, and then a bee stung me. No, but Benjamin, no, he'll say, I like Superman. And can we watch SpongeBob today? You know, Ben, what happened to your cheek? Why do you have this sting? Oh, you know, in my school there's a slide, and the teacher, he doesn't tell a story in a way that kind of builds suspense or leads right to the question. And that's because he doesn't have an experience in storytelling. You don't have a lot of experience in storytelling right now in the academic genre. And so a lot of times people, when they start writing academically, it's like they're going back to not knowing how to tell a story anymore. So I want to focus, to finish today's class, on one thing that will come up again a lot in this class is, what does it mean, this point about writing difficult to follow? And this basically has to do with something, an area called cohesion and coherence. Let me give you an example of what I mean. Does this make sense to you? You're saying, yes, this makes sense to you. But why does it make sense to you? I mean, there's no clear logical reason why it should make sense, because I live in Curitiba, I have many umbrellas. There's some knowledge that you have, that you assume that I have if you write that, because in order to understand these two statements, you have to know, first of all, what? That it rains a lot in Curitiba, and therefore you need umbrella. But I just explained the logic behind this. Yeah. If I read this and if I'm from Tokyo, Japan, or if I'm from Munich, Germany, this may not make much sense to me immediately. I live in Curitiba, I have many, what does one thing have to do with the other? But see, this is what happens to a lot of us when we start writing academically. Especially you who are working on your dissertations and theses in your doctoral degree. You are spending 1, 2, 3, 4 years, sometimes more, thinking about your research, thinking about what you're writing, thinking, you know, the intimate details of your research. And you have to tell that to somebody who's never heard about your subject before, and it's easy to skip out important details because it's you have thought about it so much that it seems obvious to you. But you're not making the connection clear, and this happens very often. People who are just finishing their doctoral degrees, just finishing their master's degrees, and then they try to write an article, and the reader says, I don't understand the relationship between this and this. And it's because to you it seems obvious because you've thought about it morning, noon, and night. You've eaten and you've slept and you've breathed your research for years. It seems obvious. Just like for you, it seems obvious. What? You need umbrellas if you're in Curitiba. But if you're from somewhere else, it's not so obvious. So there's a clear problem here with logic. This is not easy to follow. And that's what they mean, these reviewers, when they talk about when something's difficult to follow. You could say that, roughly speaking, there are 3 layers of success or failure when it comes to an article. One related to language itself, in this case, English. The other one is to do with writing. So how clear, how logical is your writing? And the third one is to do with the research itself, method, and so on. However, what few people think about is that these have different weights. I like to think of it more like this. That, yeah, language is important. The writing itself, how clear you are in your writing, is even more important. And at the base of that pyramid is the research itself. And if the research isn't good, doesn't matter if the language is excellent. If the research is bad, then that article is going to get rejected. If the research is good and people can't follow and understand that the research is important, then your article might get rejected. I like to think of this pyramid this way. That Kappa can fix this problem. There's grammatical mistakes here. I live on Curitiba should be I live in Curitiba. I has many brothers should be have. I could correct the mistakes here, but the problem of the coherence and the cohesion between these two persists. I haven't fixed the deeper problem. And so you can conceive this pyramid this way, that a person who receives your article, if the language, the top of the pyramid is bad, it's almost as if they can't see the bottom of it. They can't see the research. It's like they can see that I can't understand this. I can't understand the language, I can't understand the writing. They can't even see the bottom of the pyramid. It obfuscates your research. So you need to have good communication, but that's not limited to English. It's limited to writing clearly, making your writing easy to follow as well, so that they can see your research. If you have a good study, if you have good research, then make that shown. So for this class, to finish up, what do you need? First thing, you will need a computer. You don't necessarily need a computer here. Not necessarily, because responding to your question about the energy, this class is only going to be an hour and a half in the auditorium. Why only an hour and a half, usually? Because in the last time I did this course, we tried to do practical activities as a second part of the course, and it didn't work because a lot of people, they prefer to think about, and they need time, and that's one key thing about writing well. Writing is a process that needs time. And so spending 3 hours here talking about writing doesn't make any sense at all. You need to actually write. And for you to write, you need time. You need to be in a place that you feel good in working with, and a space that you feel comfortable with electricity so that you can write, with good Wi-Fi so that you can write. Second of all, you know what this is here? Yes. So the times in this class that we do use cell phones and other, because we will have some interactive activities here, pray that everything works. Usually it does. And then, now you have to think in Portuguese. What is this last thing here? Yes, dados, data. It's very difficult to write without having that. In reality, all research, all empirical research, is the data that drives the writing. Without the data, you're writing in a vacuum. So if you don't have any data, your challenge is going to be much more complicated. You can do it, and we'll talk about it later in this course about things that you can do without data. But really, if you have data or if you can access data, it'll be much better for you. It'll be much better for what you get out of this course. A notebook, a regular notebook, if you don't have a computer, will work fine in this course. Some people ask me about the level of English. Well, I would say that maybe there are people here in this room, and there might be people here watching live right now who are already thinking, oh my God, it's all in English, I'm freaking out, I can't handle this, forget it, I'm going home, I'm gonna go to bed and hide under the covers. As in any class, there'll be different levels of English here in this room and different levels of English at home. I would say, don't freak out, don't panic. Don't panic, because you have a few weeks before you can cancel the course. Wait. Yeah, seriously. Because the first day, it was very difficult. I will be talking less in future courses. I'm talking a lot today because it's the first class. I'll be talking less. You'll have more things to look at to help you understand in future classes, and you'll find that you can actually get used to it. You'll find that it's not too scary. It's not, as you say, a bicho de sete cabeças. It'll be okay. You will have to register on this site. It's goformative.com. And you will enter this class code, ENZBHK. Why this site? Because this site can do some things that Moodle can't do. And so I will be using Moodle in this course, but I'll also be using this. And this will be also important for your evaluation of this course. And regarding your assessment, how you'll be graded, through the activities on Moodle, through the activities in GoFormative, there will be several opportunities for you to show that you are participating in this class. That, to me, is the most important thing. More important than if you have a grammatical mistake or anything on your work. What we want to see at the end of this course is evidence that you have tried, that you've been involved throughout the course. That, for us, is more important than anything else. There is a final paper, which you will have time to write throughout the course. You'll be building to that. I'm not going to tell you tomorrow to write a paper. You'll be building to that by the end of this course. And throughout the process, it will be important for you to be in dialogue with your advisors, because your advisor is also going to have some input on your final grade. So be nice to your advisors, because they're going to have some input. It's not only them who grades. I also look to see if my grade agrees with their grade. But they are there to also give their input. Other sources of help for this class, you're going to have your advisor, but you also have Kappa. This is going to be a big source of help, I hope, for you guys. Everybody who's watching this now will have free access to this. How do you do that? During class, or durante class, that's really weird. You will be able to have your questions answered through the link above the slide. They'll always appear. And after class, you will be able to send questions to a website or to an email address, which I'll show you in a minute. But also you will be able to schedule a visit to ask questions personally. So I'm going to show that to you now. Let me just quickly show you the website, our class page. Let's see. So if you go to Dr. Ron Martinez, drronmartinez.com. And this link is on this on the site as well. If you go to classes and Universidade Federal do Paraná, the first one here is PRPPG 7000, Escrita, Acadêmica em Inglês. You click on that, and that's our class page. And on here is the email to send your dúvidas, which will be answered within 24 hours usually by the teaching assistants that we have. But I would encourage you to click here first, as many of the questions that you have will appear here. This FAQ, this frequently asked questions, was built based on the questions that appeared in the last version of this course last year. So you'll find that a lot of the questions that you asked this year will already be here. Now, when you want to come in and talk to somebody, which you should do throughout the semester, then you just click on here, Agendar Atendimento. And you can choose Amanda, who's here. She's the prettiest one. Then there's João. No, he's also pretty. Mateus and Patricia. Oh no, Patricia's a tie, I think, with you, Amanda. I'm sorry. And you choose them not by name or by looks, but you choose them by the schedule. So you can see which one has the schedule which best matches yours. And then you just click on that, put in your name, your email, and that's it. You'll get a confirmation. You'll also find the ementa, the syllabus for this class here. A number of readings, which we'll refer to throughout the course. And then also the slides for every class will appear here as well. So today's slides are already here. You will also get a resumo, a summary of today's class here. And today's homework is already here, which I'll explain shortly. Yes, you already have homework. All right. So, as I mentioned, the involvement of your advisor is really important. Some people say, oh, but my advisor doesn't speak English. It won't be necessary for most of the activities in this course. Some, it'll be useful, but not necessary. And there is a questionnaire link that you have to register your advisor in addition to his SIGA consent. On our class page, there is a link to a questionnaire about you and your advisor that is very important. Oh, yes, I almost forgot. On our old website, on the CAPA website, CAPA, which is capa.ufpr.br. There's a link there called Cursos. And if you click on Escrita Acadêmica em Inglês, you see last year's course. So if you want to see the slides in Portuguese from last year, you can see them here. Much of the content will be the same. So you can see all of that as well, and as well as resumos of the classes there too. So that might help you too. Right. Here is our class schedule, calendar. As Professor Hodaki mentioned, on one of these dates, the class will not meet here in the auditorium. It's going to meet somewhere else, but in this building. I'm not sure which date it is yet. Do you? Oh, really? Okay. So the 22nd, the 29th, and the 5th will be somewhere else.
They're going to receive an email with the change.
Okay. So when you receive an email about the change, send it to me, please. No, I'm just kidding. And you can see, the schedule, what it's going to be like. You can see that generally speaking, we work through the structure of an article. Two things to see here, two important things, is that on the 26th of September, you will have an introduction section that will be due. So that will represent kind of the first big piece of writing, couple of pages that you'll have for this class, for which you'll receive feedback. And then the second one is when you have a chance to read each other's papers, and you'll have to give peer feedback, and that will be on the 31st of October. Those are really kind of important dates. The date for the submission of your final evaluation, which will be your paper, will be much later, February or March next year, so that you have time to write. You don't want to rush We don't want to pressure you to write an entire paper in just this short time. Anything else that I should mention here? Yes. In the second week of October, we will have a special guest speaker here who will be giving the class. And also on the 7th of November, we hope to invite an international speaker here as well. So that's to be confirmed still. Now, last year we had some special guests for the last day, and that was recorded. And you're going to have to watch the video of that recording that will represent basically the second half of today's class. So, first things to do when you get home, when you get out of here, make sure you register informative. I'll show you again on the site in a second. Make sure you complete the questionnaire that's on our page and do the activity. So let me show you again on the website what that is. So our homework, your homework, is to complete this questionnaire. You click on here, and this will take you to the questionnaire. Please complete that before next class. You will also need to go to Formative and register there. You click on that link, and you put in the code here. And finally, this video here, this is the video of journal editors giving advice, giving tips on the publication process. You will need to watch this in order to complete the first assignment on Formative. And that's it. And that concludes today's class. I'm sorry I went a little bit over time today. It was exceptional because of it being the first class and getting things organized. But in the future, we should be finishing around 3:30 usually. All right? So, are you excited? It's going to be good. It's going to be great. I hope. Thank you all. Really nice meeting you, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.